First of all, let me say a huge thank you to everyone for the messages of concern. My hope was to put out 2 videos a week, or at least that, but life got a little bit busy. But I'm back on track, and I'm hoping to do 1 video a week to keep inspiring and educating. But for today, I'd like to talk about standards, and not the ones that you say you have, the ones that you actually live by, because those are not always the same thing. I know it's easy to say, I know my worth, I deserve better, I don't, or I won't and shouldn't tolerate that again. But your life doesn't reflect what you say, it reflects what you allow. That's the uncomfortable truth, because every time you walk past something that doesn't feel right, a comment, a behavior, a situation, a pattern, and you do nothing, you've just set a standard, not consciously, but energetically, and your brain registers that immediately. This is where the science of it comes in, because you know me. Your brain constantly is updating what is normal based on repetition. It's called predictive coding. It looks at your past behavior and says, this is what we accept, this is what we will tolerate, this is what we expect moving forward. So if you consistently allow things that don't align with your values, your brain stops flagging them as a problem. They become familiar, and familiar becomes normal. That's how people slowly drift away from themselves. Not in a big moment, in 1,000 small ones. The moment you didn't speak up, the moment that you laughed something off that didn't feel right or didn't feel good is the moment that you stayed quiet instead of honoring yourself. And that really adds up. And over time, you don't recognize yourself anymore. And that is not because you've changed. It's because you've disconnected. And here's the shift. Raising your standards is not about becoming difficult. It's about becoming aligned. It's about deciding, this is what I will participate in, and this is what I won't. And then actually following through with that. That's the part that people skip. Because standards without action are just ideas. And ideas don't change your life. Decisions do. Followed by action. Followed by consistency. And here's where it gets even deeper. Your standards are directly connected to your identity. You don't rise to your goals. You fall back to your identity. That's behavioral science. And if you still see yourself as someone who tolerates and overgives and overexplains, overextends, you will continue to behave that way. You know, even if you say that you want something different. So the real question then becomes, who am I being? You know, not what do I want? Who am I being? Because the version of you who has high standards doesn't debate them. She doesn't negotiate them. And she doesn't explain them 10 times to make other people feel comfortable. She lives them quietly, consistently, without needing approval. And that is power. And no, it's not easy at first, because when you start raising your standards, you will feel it. You will feel the discomfort, the pushback, the internal voice that is saying, oh, don't be too much. Don't make this a big deal. Just let it go. Well, that voice is not your truth. That is your conditioning. That is the part of you that learned it was safer to stay small than to stand firm. But here's the reality. every time that you honor your standards, well, you build yourself trust. And self-trust is the foundation of confidence, not external validation, not compliments, not being chosen. Self-trust. Knowing that when something doesn't feel right, you will listen. And that changes everything, because now you don't need to control people. You don't need to fix situations. You simply remove yourself from what doesn't align. That is a different level of power. And I've lived both sides of this. I've lived with very low standards disguised as being understanding. I've lived with overgiving disguised as being a good person. And I've lived with silence disguised as keeping the peace. And none of it brought me peace. None of it. But it brought me disconnection. It brought me exhaustion. It brought me a life that didn't feel like mine until I changed one thing. I stopped walking past what didn't feel right, and I started paying attention. I started responding. I started choosing myself in small, consistent ways, and that's when everything shifted. Not overnight, but steadily. Because standards are not built in one big decision. They're built in daily choices. What you allow, what you entertain, what you respond to, what you walk away from. That is your life. So if you're listening to this and you feel like something is off, it probably is. And the question is not, am I overreacting? The question is, why am I still allowing this? That's where your power is, because your next level is not doing more, but it's about tolerating less. And once you truly understand that, you stop chasing better and you start choosing it.